Welcome to the debate. Right now, hovering over Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, there is a 13-kilometer invisible perimeter.
Yeah, an absolute dead zone.
Exactly. If a single bolt of lightning strikes inside that bubble, time essentially stops for the 2026 World Cup. So today, we're looking at a match completely paralyzed by the atmosphere.
Which is just wild to see in real time.
It really is. The June 22nd Group I match between France and Iraq has been abruptly halted under FIFA's severe weather mode. We're talking about a massive, stalling thunderstorm right at the start of the second half. It has thrust the entire tournament into, well, completely uncharted territory.
Uncharted is, it's the perfect word for it. We're so used to football being this highly regulated, closed ecosystem, you know?
Right, totally controlled.
Yeah. The referee blows the whistle, and for 45 minutes, the outside world essentially ceases to exist. But today, that meticulously controlled environment has just been shattered by a massive systemic environmental shock.
And that shock creates the central question we are examining today. When an indefinite, chaotic weather interruption just rips a match apart, what is the true impact on the pitch? I'll be taking the position that this unprecedented pause primarily penalizes the leading team.
Which is France in this case.
Right, France. It penalizes them by completely destroying their physical and psychological momentum and honestly exposing them to profound physiological dangers.
Well, and I come at it from a different way, because while the scoreboard tells one story, the tactical reality on the pitch was telling another. My perspective is that an interruption like this actually serves as a crucial, perhaps match-saving tactical lifeline for a team that's struggling against an opponent's structural pressure.
Okay, well, let me lay out why this is nothing short of a physiological and psychological disaster for the French side. I mean, they did the hardest thing to do in a World Cup. They broke the deadlock.
Yeah, early on.
Right, they secured a 1-0 lead with Kylian Mbappe's strike in the 14th minute. They had a rhythm, but beyond the shattered momentum, the primary issue is severe physiological degradation.
The body cooling down?
Exactly. If you take elite athletes after 45 minutes of maximal effort and bring them to a sudden, indefinite stop, their bodies simply revolt. Core body temperatures plummet. The synovial fluid, which acts as the lubricant in their joints, it thickens.
Like cold oil in a car.
That's a great way to put it. Muscles stiffen up, asking these players to eventually return to a waterlogged, dangerously slippery pitch after a massive, unpredictable delay. It exponentially increases the risk of serious hamstring tears and joint sprains. They are essentially being punished for taking the lead.
Look, I understand the physical risks entirely. And, we'll dive into the biomechanics of that in a bit. But I look at this interruption fundamentally as a tactical event, one that completely alters the strategic landscape.
But how can you separate the tactics from the physical reality?
Because you have to look at what was happening on the ball. If we look closely at the moments just before the stoppage, France was actually in deep distress. Despite the 1-0 lead, they were being suffocated by the Iraqi tactical block.
Suffocated is a strong word for a team that's winning.
But they were. This severe weather acts as a lifeline for them. The chaotic evacuation, this indefinite locker room pause, it gives the French coaching staff a golden opportunity.
A golden opportunity, seriously?
Yes, it essentially grants them an unlimited halftime to conduct deep video analysis, calm the panic down, and solve the Iraqi puzzle that was actively dismantling their midfield.
Okay, let's start right there with the locker room dynamic, because I really don't think we can call it a golden opportunity when you factor in the psychological attrition of this specific delay.
You mean the clock?
Yeah, the strict U.S. and FIFA weather protocol at play here. As I mentioned at the top, they operate on a 13-kilometer lightning perimeter. The rule dictates a mandatory 30-minute countdown for a strike within that radius. But it's the specific mechanism of that countdown that is so brutal.
Right, it's the reset clause that really dictates the psychological environment.
Exactly. It's not a cumulative 30 minutes. Every single time a new lightning bolt is detected within that 8-mile radius, the clock restarts to 0.
Which is agonizing.
It is mental torture. So if a storm system is stalling over Philadelphia, you aren't just waiting 30 minutes. You could be waiting hours, but you are experiencing it in these agonizing 30-minute increments. The players are trapped.
Trapped between resting and staying ready.
Nay, they are oscillating between the biological need to decompress after half a game of World Cup football and the psychological mandate to stay entirely focused because they might be called back out at any moment. That isn't a classroom, as you put it.
Wait, let me pause you right there to clarify. Because while I agree it's a massive cognitive strain, elite coaching staffs anticipate environmental chaos. They prepare for disruptions like this.
Do they really prepare for a 2-hour lightning delay mid-match?
They prepare for the unexpected. You're framing the locker room as a place of panic, but a modern World Cup dressing room is a highly controlled environment.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective. How can a manager effectively utilize these long video tactical sessions you mentioned when the players are in a state of psychological limbo?
By managing the environment.
But you cannot absorb complex tactical adjustments when your brain is trapped in a holding pattern of fight or flight readiness. The players don't know if they're walking out to the tunnel in 15 minutes or 2 hours.
And that's exactly why the indefinite pause is a tool. It's like taking an open book test where you were failing, but then the fire alarm gets pulled.
Okay, that's an interesting analogy.
Right? You suddenly have an hour in the hallway to look up all the answers before you have to go back in and finish. Yes, there's uncertainty about the clock, but managers use this delay to project video analysis on large screens. They turn stadium panic into a controlled, strategic classroom.
But what about the anxiety, the sheer stress of the clock?
If a player is too anxious, staffs will literally give them noise-canceling headphones. They use specific music playlists to isolate them, allowing them to conserve cognitive energy. For the rest of the squad, the manager can physically point to the screen and explain the mechanics of what's failing. For example, he can show exactly how the Iraqi double pivot is operating.
And just for our listeners, when we talk about a double pivot, we're talking about two defensive midfielders working in tandem. They essentially act as a swinging door to shut down the passing lanes the moment the French attackers try to cut inside.
Precisely. And the manager can show the French players, look, when Mbappe drops deep, their double pivot steps up and cuts the passing lane to the wing. It takes this nebulous feeling of being overwhelmed on the pitch and turns it into a tangible, solvable problem on a screen.
I get that.
It shifts their focus from the anxiety of the storm to a concrete tactical adjustment.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Because you can put noise-canceling headphones on a player to protect their cognitive load all you want, but you cannot outthink human metabolism.
Well, sure.
While their mind is resting, their body is actively crashing. Let's look at the timeline of what actually happened when the whistle blew. The players came into the locker room for what they thought was a regular 15-minute halftime.
Right.
Within the first 3 minutes, they consumed their standard recovery drinks. These aren't just Gatorades, you know? They are highly specific formulations of simple carbohydrates and electrolytes designed to be metabolized immediately for the second half.
The glycogen replenishment window.
Yeah, they are fueling the engine for the next 45 minutes. Precisely. The body expects to be burning those carbohydrates within 10 to 15 minutes. If you are watching at home, you might just see guys sitting around waiting. But what the broadcast doesn't show you is the nutritional crisis happening inside their bodies.
A crisis might be overstating it a bit, don't you think?
Not at all. When that delay stretches for an hour or two, they metabolize that high-octane fuel while sitting totally stationary. This causes a massive insulin spike, followed by an aggressive energy crash. They face a severe risk of hypoglycemia. And you can't just give them another heavy carbohydrate drink an hour later, or their stomachs will reject it and they'll cramp on the pitch. It is an absolute nightmare for the medical staff. Elite athletes are essentially experiencing a profound sugar crash right when they need to be at peak performance.
Okay, that is a compelling argument. But have you considered the rigorous locker room restart protocols that are deployed the second a delay is announced?
I know they have protocols, but
The medical and sports science staffs don't just let the players sit in wet kits and metabolize their drinks into fat. The second the severe weather mode is activated, they immediately strip the players of their rain-soaked gear.
sure, they get them warm.
They put them in dry thermal underwear and thick tracksuits to trap their core body heat. And crucially, they deploy stationary bikes and resistance bands right there in the concrete corridors of Lincoln Financial Field. They are actively maintaining cardiovascular readiness to offset that exact metabolic crash you're talking about.
Okay, I acknowledge they are on the bikes in the hallway. But we have to look at the why and the how of football movements. A stationary bike only keeps the blood pumping in a straight, linear motion.
Right, it's mostly cardiovascular.
It does absolutely nothing for the stabilizing muscles in the ankles and knees, or the player's proprioception, their spatial awareness of where their limbs are in space. That is exactly what fails when they have to make a sudden lateral cut.
I see what you're saying.
And that introduces a terrifying variable when the FIFA officials finally give the green light. The regulations generally allow for a 10 to 15 minute secondary pitch warm-up.
Which, given an hour-long break, is incredibly brief.
It is the absolute bare minimum required. And think about what they are stepping out onto. A waterlogged grass pitch that has just taken on an immense amount of rain. The surface tension is completely altered.
Yeah, it's going to be a swamp out there.
Exactly. Let's go back to the synovial fluid I mentioned earlier. This fluid acts like motor oil in the joints. When a player is running for 45 minutes, that fluid is warm, thin, and coats the cartilage perfectly.
But after sitting around,
Right. When they sit in a chilly, air-conditioned locker room for an hour and a half, that fluid becomes thick and viscous. So now you have players with cold joints whose stabilizing muscles haven't fired laterally in 2 hours, stepping onto a slick mud surface where their cleats might not catch, or worse, might catch too deeply in the turf.
oh, wow, yeah, the injury risk is high.
The line between tournament scheduling and catastrophic player injury, hamstrings snapping, ACLs tearing, severe ankle sprains is razor thin here.
Look, I don't disagree with the physical peril. Both teams are stepping onto a much more dangerous surface, and the biomechanical risks are real and alarming.
Thank you.
But we have to look at how this physical reality intersects with the actual flow of the game. The storm doesn't just affect physiology, it fundamentally alters the narrative and structure of the match. This brings us to the dueling narratives of match momentum.
And momentum is exactly why France is the victim here. A team leading 1-0 relies on a continuous flow of adrenaline. They have established dominance, they have the emotional high ground.
Do they, though?
Yes, when you snap that rhythm, you create what sports psychologists call a false rhythm. Upon the restart, it inherently benefits the underdog, in this case, Iraq. They get a free, unearned opportunity to break France's dominance without having to actually win the ball back in open play.
The storm did the defending for them.
Exactly, halting France right in their tracks.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Your argument hinges entirely on the idea that France had dominance to lose just because the scoreboard said 1-0.
They were literally winning the game.
On the scoreboard, yes. But if we look at the actual reports of the match dynamics just before the stoppage, France was actually a team suffocating. They were in total distress. The Iraqi tactical block had completely asphyxiated the French midfield right as the second half began.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because France still had the lead. I mean, Mbappe scored early and they were holding it.
The scoreboard reflects the 14th minute, but the momentum reflects the 45th minute. Iraq's structure was growing into the game. Their pressing triggers were working.
But a delay doesn't just erase a lead.
No, but consider the sheer apocalyptic nature of the stoppage. We had tens of thousands of fans fleeing the uncovered stands in an absolute panic. A deluge of rain, blinding lightning. The players looked absolutely haggard, battered by the elements as they were rushed down the tunnel.
It was a crazy scene, for sure.
A shock of that magnitude doesn't just pause a game, it wipes the slate clean. Because France was being tactically squeezed, this massive environmental shock actually shattered Iraq's growing tactical momentum. It disrupted their pressing rhythm just as they were turning the screws.
That's an interesting narrative. But a tactical block isn't a fragile psychological state that just blows away in the wind. It's a deeply ingrained structural organization on the pitch.
Of course, it's structural.
Right, so Iraq knows exactly how they were pressing France, the spacing, the triggers, the passing lanes they were denying. A 2-hour delay doesn't make the Iraqi players forget their defensive assignments.
I'm not saying they forget.
If anything, the delay allows the Iraqi players to physically recover the massive amounts of energy required to maintain that high-intensity block. And let's remember the mechanics of a heavy pitch.
The water slows everything down.
Exactly. When they return, France will be facing a fully rested Iraqi defense on waterlogged grass that naturally decelerates the ball. Slowing down the speed of play inherently favors the defending team, because it gives them an extra half second to shift their block and close down spaces.
Well, that assumes France will walk back out and play the exact same way they did in the first half. And this circles back to the unlimited halftime era.
How so?
The heavy pitch slows the ball, yes, but it also means the space behind the defense becomes more predictable. The French coaching staff has just been handed the time to completely rewrite their approach.
So you think they abandoned their whole game plan?
They adapt. They can look at the video, acknowledge that their intricate short passing game was failing against the Iraqi bloc, and say, okay, the pitch is flooded. We can no longer play through the middle.
Right, skip the middle entirely.
Exactly. They can shift to a more direct strategy, utilizing long balls to the wings, bypassing the midfield trap entirely. That level of strategic pivot is normally impossible in a standard 15-minute halftime, when players are just trying to catch their breath. That is a profound tactical intervention provided entirely by the weather.
It is an intervention, certainly, but one that comes at a massive, almost irresponsible cost to the leading team.
Fair enough.
When we synthesize what we've unpacked today, my position remains that the sheer physical and mental toll inherently punishes the team that entered the locker room with the advantage. I mean, France did the hardest thing in international football. They scored a goal and forced the opponent to chase the game.
They did secure the early lead, yeah.
Right. And now, instead of managing that lead organically, they are subjected to the psychological torture of a resetting 30-minute lightning clock. They are battling the severe nutritional gaps and insulin crashes of an extended delay.
The physiology is definitely fighting against them.
And they face the terrifying physical risks of bringing cold, viscous joints onto a flooded pitch, where the biomechanics of every cut and sprint are compromised. They are paying a massive physiological tax just to retain a lead they already rightfully earned.
And while I can see the physiological tax is immense and the injury risk is genuinely concerning, I conclude that it is a price worth paying for a team that was essentially losing its grip on the match.
Even with the risks?
Yes, because the interruption forces a complete reset of a game where the tactical momentum was actively shifting against them. The ability to utilize an indefinite pause as a strategic classroom, to use video analysis to dismantle the opponent's block and adjust to the new environmental reality, it proves that severe weather delays aren't just physical endurance tests.
They're a tactical lifeline.
Exactly. They are profound tactical interventions that can rescue a drowning team.
It truly is an unprecedented crisis for this 2026 World Cup. I mean, the fact that FIFA has no set maximum delay time before cancellation means the players, the managers, and the fans are entirely at the mercy of the atmosphere.
It really strips away all the modern comforts and the illusion of control we've come to expect from elite sports. We treat the pitch like a laboratory, but nature always has the final say.
It really does. We started today by talking about the World Cup as a perfectly engineered ecosystem, a place where everything is visible, categorized, and controlled.
Until the lightning strikes.
Right. When the sky opens up, that illusion of control vanishes instantly. It leaves us to wonder whether brilliant locker room tactical adjustments or the raw limits of human physiology will ultimately decide this match. And honestly, that's a question that will remain completely unanswered until the skies over Philadelphia finally clear.